Northern England doesn't get nearly the same spotlight as London or Edinburgh. And honestly, that's exactly what made me want to visit. I'd been to Liverpool once before and loved it, but I always had the feeling the North had so much more waiting. It turns out I've been sleeping on a part of the UK that's equal parts history, character, and raw beauty. And if we're comparing to London or Edinburgh, it's definitely much cheaper. So in this video, I'll take you through 4 of the places I visited on my recent trip to Northern England: Manchester, Sheffield, York, and the Yorkshire Coast. Together, they show just how diverse the North really is. So let's start in Manchester. After finding solid prices on some British Airways business class tickets,
and well, that is actually really good.
This is where my partner Rasa and I started our week in Northern England. Manchester is a city that feels something like the Industrial Revolution reimagined for the 21st century. Once the beating heart of Britain's factories and textile mills, today it's a place of creativity, nightlife, and football fandom that runs deep. Locals might not love me for saying this, but there are definitely some similarities to Liverpool in that sense. There's enough to do in this city for many days, if not weeks, but we only had one night. With really only an evening and part of the next morning, we still managed to get a good feel for the city. In much of the city, you'll find historic warehouses and canals that give off a certain Manchester vibe. And from the Holiday Inn Express that cost me about $100 for the night, lots was within an easy walk. There's the city's iconic Chinatown. This is the second largest Chinatown in the UK. I mean, it's not that big if you compare it to New York or even London, but it's a cultural center and you've got lots of dining options there. Then as you get more central, the warehouses and canals are replaced with historical building after historical building. This is the kind of city I enjoyed just visiting to walk around in. You don't necessarily need entry tickets or even solid plans to have a nice day here. But if you do come here with a solid plan, there's a good chance that it's going to involve soccer, better known as football. Whether you're into United, City, even Liverpool, or just the buzz on match day, you can't ignore it here. At the very end of my trip, I found myself back in Manchester only to switch trains, but it was on match day and it seemed like everyone at the station had only one thing in mind. So of course visiting Manchester for a few days will give you more time to experience the city. But even just a little time here is worthwhile. It's gritty, modern, historic, and fun all at once, and it makes the perfect gateway to the north. But the following morning, it was time to head up north on the train. First to York for a quick stop, and then finally to a quaint and historical B&B in the seaside town of Redcar. Surprisingly, it's not named after a red vehicle. So after walking through Manchester to the train station, mostly retracing our steps from the day before, it was time to head off on the train. After 2 relatively short train rides on the Northern Line and a quick switch in Leeds, we had made it to York. Stepping into the city is kind of like time travel. The entire Old Town is encircled by England's longest medieval city walls, and walking them gives you views straight into history. York definitely has a slower pace than Manchester, but it's packed with heritage. You could say it's Northern England at its most medieval. It's definitely a place to bring your walking shoes, and a simpler walk around the walls gave me a really good overview of the city in less than 3 hours. First off, there's the York Minster. It's a towering Gothic cathedral, and it's an impressive one. Then along the walls, you get all kinds of cool views and interesting history along the way. Towards the end, at least if you walk the walls clockwise like I did, you'll find what's left of the city's castle, namely Clifford's Tower, a Norman stronghold that's seen centuries of history. But having only about 3 hours meant my actual time in the Old Town was more limited than I would have liked. But with only a few minutes, I realized there's a lot going on there, and the ancient streets and alleyways are unique. Plus, the old butcher alley known as the Shambles is said to have been an influence for Diagon Alley from the Harry Potter series. But if budget is of any concern, know that York is not the most affordable place to stay in Northern England. It's in high demand, and pricing reflects that, even beyond just hotel pricing. We had considered spending a night here to break up the trip out to the coast, but prices were just much better elsewhere. That said, I was visiting in mid-spring right before Easter. During off-peak times, prices can be a lot better. So especially if you happen to be visiting during winter, you might find better deals. Oh yeah, and for a quick and tasty bite on a budget, give Lebanese right in the train station a try. There's something very unique about eating shawarma in what was once the world's biggest train station. And if you're getting value out of this video, make sure to give it a like. But for my trip, York was really just the gateway to North Yorkshire. I'd be heading back down to South Yorkshire to get to know Sheffield a few days later, but first it was time to spend 3 tranquil nights on the coast. At least that was the plan. When you head east and reach the coast along the North Sea, the vibe completely changes. I focused my coastal times around the towns of Redcar and Saltburn by the Sea. Redcar is a seaside town with long sandy beaches, a sort of lively promenade, and some unique history. It's sort of between that old holiday by the sea feel and something a little more modern. I jokingly called it the Coney Island of England in my other video about the historical B&B I stayed at, but it really does kind of have that vibe. And would you just look at that thing right there? That is the Redcar Beacon. To be honest, I stayed in Redcar because it was cheaper than the other towns along the sea in the area. But just down the coast is Saltburn by the Sea. Though Redcar was definitely nicer and more interesting than I expected it to be, Saltburn surprised me more. Here you'll find dramatic cliffs, fossil-filled beaches, and the UK's oldest water-powered cliff tramway. Plus, there's Saltburn Pier, the last surviving pleasure pier on this part of the coast. To me, this stretch of coastline just feels worlds away from a place like London or Edinburgh, with tides that sweep out for blocks and landscapes that tell both prehistoric and Victorian stories. It's definitely not a Mediterranean beach resort, but it's got a whole separate experience to offer. Walking along the beach, searching for fossils, spending the day in a beachside cabin, or grabbing some fish and chips are all a part of the experience. Although despite visiting in April, I did see some people swimming. And as for the fish and chips, they were delicious, but the battle that came after, less so. Despite losing a full day to battling those fish and chips, I was still having an overall positive experience though. This part of the coast in North Yorkshire does something to you. Between the wind, the water, and a unique feeling, it's a place that lets you relax while offering a ton to experience. Definitely give my video on Saltburn a watch if you're intrigued. I've seen very few people visit the place, and it's just got so much depth. So with a few new fossils in my bag that my wife actually found, to be fair, I mostly just walked around looking at snails and stuff, it was time to head back on the train to the biggest city in South Yorkshire, Sheffield. This was once known as the English Steel City, but it's now better described as a green city with a creative edge. Compared to larger cities in the UK, Sheffield felt a bit more affordable to visit. We spent a night at a Hampton by Hilton for just 20,000 points, but I saw solid hotels outside of the city centre going for under £100 a night. And while the city centre of Sheffield itself is not that big, it's definitely worth a visit. There's a nice mix of the historic and the modern. During my visit, I think it was a little busier than normal due to the pool competition taking place. But what I really found unique in Sheffield was Kelham Island and the area around it. Along the River Don, this area was historically home to huge industry. But now it's a trendy place to live with a great museum about Sheffield and its industrial past. And they do happen to have the world's largest steam engine here. You can really smell all of the oils that they have to use to maintain this thing. It smells like a massive mechanic's workshop. Now they do actually operate it for touristic purposes. Today it's not operating though. That doesn't make it any smaller. Apparently I could just get power in my house from my wife doing this. What does it mean? In the neighborhood, you'll also find tons of gastronomy. In the neighborhood food hall, I had one of the best coffees I've found yet in the UK. And there's a huge indoor market selling all kinds of quirky things you'd be unlikely to think exist without visiting it. Just keep in mind, you break it, you buy it. You could definitely call Sheffield industrial, but it's also innovative, outdoorsy, and is said to be one of the UK's most livable cities. And another thing it's known for is that it's right next to the Peak District National Park. It's known for its rolling hills and is said to offer some of the UK's best hiking. If only we'd had one extra day, the Peak District would have been the perfect stop to add for a nice hike. But the train window views would just have to do for this trip as we headed back to Manchester Airport to board a flight on everybody's favorite airline. Together, Manchester, York, the Yorkshire Coast, and Sheffield show how Northern England is more than just one story. From medieval walls to seaside piers, football stadiums to industrial pasts turned present, it's a region that, as I've learned, deserves to be explored in its own right. So maybe next time you're planning a trip to the UK, don't only go to London. Head north and you'll get a side of England that's historic, surprising, and definitely unforgettable. I really hope you've enjoyed this little guide video from my recent trip, and if you did, don't forget to like, make sure you're subscribed, and if you want to see more videos like this on the channel, definitely drop a comment below. I'll see you all in the next video, and thanks so much for watching.